The Russian enterprise Elabuga in Tatarstan, which produces Shaheeds for strikes on Ukraine, has repeatedly been the target of attacks by the defense forces, and strikes on it must continue. Otherwise, the enemy will be able to work in hothouse conditions. This was stated by the editor-in-chief of the publication Defense Express, Oleg Katkov, on air at Espreso. Commenting on a recent Russian propaganda video about the work of a plant producing attack drones, he noted that the Russians have very skillfully built these logistics chains and are managing to increase production. As for the volumes, according to estimates of the Main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, at the beginning of the summer, there were 90 units of Shaheed per day. This does not only mean Elabuga. A certain number is also being assembled in Izhevsk at Kupol. Now, obviously, we are talking about 100, perhaps even a little more. That is, they continue to scale up. As for who is helping, oil is helping. The Russian budget is helping. 40% of it goes to the war. Katkov explained. According to him, as of now, the Shaheds have already become the main means of delivering combat units for the Russians, as opposed to missiles. If we take any recent attack, perhaps even in the latest 6 months, but any combined attack with cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, with Kinzhals, anything, and Shaheeds, then the enemy launches Shaheeds, so many that they have 2 to 3 times more warheads than the same missiles. That is, conventionally, missiles are responsible for delivering approximately 10 to 15,000 tons of explosives. Shaheeds for 20 to 30,000, he said. The expert expressed the opinion that if Elabuga is not attacked, the enemy will be able to work in hothouse conditions. At the same time, he admitted that it is difficult to attack the enterprise because the region has powerful air defense. There are individual attacks, but the big problem is that there is a very powerful air defense position area there. At least in the footage, when Ukrainian drones do fly over, you can see the work of the pantsirs. There are also TORs here. And probably, I am sure, there are S-400s. There are strategic facilities there. There is a triangle. This industrial economic zone Elabuga, the Kama hydroelectric power station, a little further to the east there is Naberezhny Chelny, there is Kamaz, the expert added. The Ukrainian Defense Forces dealt a crushing blow to Russian units attempting to break through to the village of Kondratovka in Sumy Oblast. One of those eliminated was Russian Army Captain Florid Israfilov, call sign North. Information about his death was confirmed by the Russian Z resource Northern Channel associated with the Russian armed forces. According to him, the Ukrainian attack drone Baba Yaga hit the positions of the Russian military, as a result of which Israfilov and several of his fellow soldiers were killed. The biggest loss was the death of Captain Florid Israfilov, call sign North, at night. He fought shoulder to shoulder with his men until the very end, like a true commander. His life and the life of several other fighters were taken yesterday by the arrival of Baba Yaga, the Z Channel's report says. Captain Israfilov held the position of commander of the regiment's logistics company, which corresponds to the level of a battalion commander. The source was surprised by his presence on the front lines, suggesting that either a lack of personnel or command errors forced him to take such a step. What was he doing in this meat grinder? Why are such personnel storming houses in a besieged village? The author asks. He suggested that Siva could have had a conflict with the regiment commander and was deliberately sent to his death. The situation in Kondratovka, as the Russians themselves admit, remains extremely difficult. Units, including the remnants of the 30th and 40th Brigades of the Russian Armed Forces, suffered very serious losses there. Only those from the 30 remained in the ranks, a couple dozen people. From the 40th Brigade, only the wounded, the Russian resource writes. The survivors are trying to save themselves by digging in on the southern outskirts of the village. Evacuation attempts are underway with the involvement of the 810th Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces, but to no avail. Groups are breaking through the fields from the eastern side, trying to get to their own, but you know what it's like to run across a postcard. The Russians complain. Ukrainian troops continue to defend and carry out pinpoint strikes on the enemy using modern drones and unmanned systems. The so-called Baba Yaga has already proven itself as an effective means of destroying enemy personnel and equipment. Ukrainian forces continue to confidently expand their strike zone with drone strikes, and even Russian military bloggers can no longer hide the losses in the rear. The Z Resource, northern channel, close to the Russian armed forces, complained about the effectiveness of Ukrainian FPV drones hitting targets deep in the Kursk region. In a publication made on July the 20th, the author of the channel writes with irritation that the Ukrainian Defense Forces are confidently using FPV drones to destroy the Russian armed forces at a depth of 20 kilometers and more. The Novoivanovka-Sverdlikovo road, deep in the rear it would seem. It's about 20 kilometers to the tape, but this doesn't stop the Ukrainian armed forces from maintaining fire control over this road with ordinary cheapy drones for $500 apiece. Noted Z Channel. He specified that on July the 19th alone, the Russian army lost about 10 units of equipment in this area. And this is the main artery of the entire garrison in Yunakovka, the statement says. Yunakovka is a village in the Sumy region where Russian occupation forces are trying to advance. In fact, the recognition of the Z Channel confirms the successful use of asymmetric tactics by the Ukrainian military. Minimal resources, maximum results. Strikes in the rear not only disrupt logistics and supply delivery, but also undermine the morale of the Russian military, who are forced to live under constant threat, even being far from the front line. Recall soldiers from the 5th Border Guard Detachment of Ukraine in the Kursk direction captured a private from the 40th Separate Marine Brigade of the Russian Pacific Fleet. A 35-year-old soldier got lost and ended up at the position of Ukrainian border guards. The man is originally from the Kurgan region of Russia. Less than a month ago, he voluntarily signed a one-year contract and agreed to be sent to the combat zone. He was promised 3 million Russian rubles for signing the contract, but he did not receive them. He was almost immediately sent to the Kursk region, and soon after that, he was sent to the first assault on Ukrainian positions. According to border guards, the battle ended positively for him, which cannot be said about the rest of the Russian soldiers who participated in the assault. Ukrainian fighters evacuated the prisoner from the position and handed him over to one of the units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces.